I guess now's a good time as any. So, yeah, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon for those who are on the West Coast. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our business law webinar tonight, featuring members of our faculty and our current student body. My name is Matt Saleh. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions here at Villanova Law, and I want to personally thank you for taking the time from your evening to learn more about how we are preparing our students over their 3 years and beyond here at Villanova. And for those of you who might not know where we are, Villanova is located in the suburbs of Philadelphia, approximately 11 miles outside of Center City. As someone who was born and raised in New York City, one thing that I particularly love about this region, and one thing that's a great asset to our students, is the fact that you don't just have access to the greater Philadelphia area, but to multiple major legal markets within a commutable distance, from the corporate capital of the country in Wilmington, Delaware, being a 30-minute drive west, to New Jersey being a similar drive east, to New York City being an 80-minute train ride via Amtrak, to Maryland being 45 minutes away, and DC about 2 hours. And all of this while being located on a gorgeous 260-acre campus inside of a state-of-the-art building that's self-contained and open 24/7, just in case you want to study into the wee hours of the morning. And with our business law concentration, our 3-year JD MBA program, JD LLM program, in taxation, our plethora of business law courses, externships, clinics, and mentorship program, there's a lot of opportunities for those who are considering a career in corporate law or business law. And to talk further about these offerings, we have with us today faculty and students who will share their work and experience with you. And during this time, we really encourage you to ask questions and learn more as we go by typing in your questions to the Q&A box below. So we're going to do our best to answer them as we go on, but also if we don't get to it during the conversation, please know that we'll get to it during the formal Q&A at the end. So just kind of to get a better sense as to where everyone is joining us from, I was hoping for those of you here, would you mind typing into the chat box where you're joining us, city and state? So if you're joining us from Philadelphia, if you could type into the chat box, Philadelphia, New York City, California. So, wow, all right. So we have people from Waltham, Massachusetts, from Iowa City in Iowa, to DC, to Dallas, Texas. I'm a Cowboys fan. Haven't been able to wear my jersey in quite a bit of time being in Philly or New York. We have Columbia, Missouri, South Carolina, Detroit, Minneapolis, Burlington, Indiana, Staten Island, Delaware. Wow. All right. So Kingston, Jamaica. So we have international and domestic students from the East Coast to the West Coast. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight for the panel. I want to introduce you to the beautiful faces you see before you. So to kind of get us started, Professor Booth, if you wouldn't mind just doing a brief introduction, telling us about what you do here and some of the things you're working on.
Yeah, my name is Richard Booth. I'm a professor here. I've been here for, I think, 14 years now. I taught at a few other schools previously. Started out, well, I practiced in New York for 6 years at a firm that no longer exists. It imploded, but that's another story. Wasn't my fault. I grew up in Indiana, in fact, not far from Fort Wayne, Marion. So our whoever's joining us from Fort Wayne, you might be interested in that. And I've taught at SMU. I see somebody's from Dallas, and I taught at Case Western for a few years, and then at the University of Maryland before I came to, before I got into heaven, basically, and here I am. So I teach advanced business law courses. I teach corporate finance, business planning, and a seminar in securities litigation. Most of my research lately has focused on index funds and securities fraud class actions, and sort of the math side of business law. So that's probably more than you need to know right now, but I'll fill in as we go along. So no, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Professor Booth. All right, to kick it over to our students now, Zach, if you want to get us started by mentioning your name, your class year, where you came from Villanova from, and maybe some of the work that you've done during your time here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Zack Mineo, and I'm a third year here at Villanova. Brooke and I are in the business law concentration. And before law school, I was working in public accounting at Deloitte for, I guess it was about 4 years. Also did a little international trip there where I was doing some accounting over in Africa for a nonprofit. But, love Villanova, so I came here. And I forget if this was one of the questions you asked or not, but after school, I'll be heading to Davis Polk in New York to work in corporate law.
Amazing. Thank you, Zach. Brooke, if you wouldn't mind going.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke. I am a 3L as well. I went to Villanova Business School prior to the law school, so I'm what you call a supernova here. I went straight through. Some of my prior work experience has been with Bryn Mawr Trust, Young Conway in Wilmington, Delaware, and next summer I'll be working at Morgan Lewis and their corporate and business transactions group. An interesting fact about myself is this summer in a law firm sponsored softball game, I fell and tore like every ligament in my ankle. So the past 2 months I have attended law school via knee scooter, wheeled all around, haven't been able to walk. So it's been a fun experience.
What would you prefer, that or being virtual?
Honestly, that, because I really didn't pay attention on Zoom very well. So, and I feel like I made so many friends just by rolling around like that. Everyone wanted to know what happened and said they liked my scooter. I should get a bell or tassels. So.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, one thing, Zach, did you have an interesting fact that you want to share?
Sure. I have an advanced dive certification, which I also got when I was in Africa.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. Humble bragging. I like it. All right. And last but certainly not least, Professor Hare, if you just want to do a brief intro in terms of what you do here at Villanova and some of the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I had to dive off for a second. I'm Professor O'Hare. I teach along with my colleague, Professor Booth. We teach a lot of the corporate and securities laws classes at Villanova. I teach the basic business organizations course. I teach securities regulation. And I also teach corporate governance. And this year I did a new course repertoire, which is corporate social responsibility. And I'm also the co-director with Professor Booth of the business law concentration.
So everyone here does quite a bit amount, from the students to the professors. Professor O'Hare, now that we have you here, I was wondering if you could just provide a brief overview of just sort of the overall business law program, the concentration, and how we're preparing our students for careers in business and corporate law coming out of school.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just give a very brief overview because I know we're going to be talking in depth about other things about the different courses and experiential learning, all that kind of stuff. But it actually starts your first year of law school. There are opportunities in the spring semester of your first year to take a 1L elective in business law in a economic analysis of the law / intro to business law kind of course, which is unusual to have that started in your first year. And we also have 2 modules. In your first year, you have a module where you learn about the business of law. And it continues on into the second year. We have the typical kinds of courses that you find at most law schools, like business, like corporations and securities regulation. We also do something different that I want to bring to your attention is we have a module sometimes in financial literacy. And so all students going through Villanova have a 1-week kind of intensive boot camp on how to read financial statements. And they may not like it at the time because they think they're coming back early from vacation, which they're not. But I think going forward in people's careers, they're going to see that this is very important learning because it's hard to be any kind of lawyer these days unless you really have an understanding of financial statements. And in the second and third years, there are opportunities to do special things, including the business law concentration that I referenced earlier that both Zach and Brooke are a part of, and also the JD MBA program. So the business law concentration, if you think of it, it's going to be the JD equivalent to a major. Most of you go into law school, you have your JD, there's no major, but more we have concentrations. Law school has several concentrations, and business law is one of them. And Professor Booth and I put together a program where we tried to select the courses and have certain experiences, required experiences, so that people, when they leave the program, really feel comfortable in becoming first-year attorneys and have what they need. We give extra advising. We set them up with alumni advisors. And so we can talk, I'm sure Brooke and Zach will talk more about that. And then Matt talked earlier about our JD MBA program, which is pretty unique because it allows students to get both of their degrees by the time they graduate law school. Lots of other schools have JD MBA programs, but often you have to continue on with your MBA program after you finish law school, which can be difficult because, you know, you're working. So, so those are some of the highlights of our business law program from a 30,000 foot level, and there'll be opportunities to kind of dig deeper through the webinar and also through the Q&A.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to what Professor Hare mentioned is that for that JD MBA program, you don't have to apply for it until March, the end of March of your first year of law school. So you can at least go through a semester of school after speaking with professors, taking classes, getting some better insight as to whether or not the JD MBA program is for you, if it's a value add that's going to help you break into the career path that you want post-graduation. So you don't have to come in making that declaration or applying and enrolling in that beforehand. So you're able to become a better informed consumer before deciding to take on additional courses and additional tuition dollars for that MBA. Although you do save quite a bit of money through doing that, the way credits are double counted. Professor O'Hare mentioned sort of the litany of different classes. And I was wondering for Professor Booth, if you wouldn't mind kind of discussing some of the faculty members that teach in the business law program that we have here at Villanova, and just some of the different class offerings that we have outside of the ones that Professor O'Hare mentioned.
Yeah, sure. Professor O'Hare and I are as she said, we developed the business law concentration, but we're not the only game in town. We've got a pretty significant business law faculty, and it's a little bit difficult to define because, you know, business law can be defined in lots of different ways, and it can be either broader or narrower. But we have several other people who really do pretty much nothing else but the business side of law. Professor Andrew Lund, who runs the modules from the faculty point of view, has done a lot of work in executive compensation, and he has tended to have an empirical bent, so that he's done some studies that actually crunch the data, and he's got an article coming out with one of his co-authors who's at Michigan at the moment. Professor Josephine Nelson is a sort of specialist in business ethics and travels all over the world to sort of deal with questions about, you know, how corporate governance can keep things like the recent Volkswagen scandal from ever happening in the first place. She's visiting this semester at Harvard Business School, so we hope to get her back. But if we don't, we'll find somebody else to replace her that's just as good. So anyway, we've also got two faculty members who are focused on clinical offerings in the business area. We've got a law and entrepreneurship clinic and a law and entrepreneurship, a center for the study of law and entrepreneurship. So we have a pretty rich offering in the way of clinics and externships at this point, but now that we've got two people working on nothing else, we're going to have even more in the future. So there are really good things still to come. And one of our writing instructors, Professor Robinson, focuses on transactional writing, which is another feature of both the general curriculum and the business law curriculum. I mean, we have an especially rich writing curriculum at Villanova, and really, no matter what you do, whether you're in business law or somewhere else, I think it's impossible to get out of here with a degree and not have taken at least 5 semesters of writing courses, and maybe it's 6. I'm not sure. sort of counting on the fly here. In any event, we've got one professor who's devoted to doing writing in the transactional area, and she's also the on-the-ground point person for the second year module, which Professor O'Hare referred to as Deal Week, which is a, I mean, it's a really, you know, I don't think it's, I think people really enjoy it. I think that when you go through it, you realize that there is actually there's really interesting stuff to be found when you start digging into corporations' financial statements and sort of figuring out where all the skeletons are buried and the dirty laundry is hidden. It's good stuff, and it's something that gets to be really quite inspiring. But other than, aside from the faculty, I just wanted to mention a couple of things about other courses that are offered besides the basic business courses, most of which have been mentioned so far. I mean, the basic entry-level business course is one in business organizations, where you learn about partnerships, corporations, the different forms of organization and so forth, and a little bit about governance, things like boards of directors and all that sort of thing. And then we have, and that's a required course for the concentration. We also offer the, basic course in securities regulation, corporate finance, accounting for lawyers, introduction to federal taxation, and also an introduction to business taxation. All of those courses are courses that you would take if you chose to be in the business law concentration. That's sort of the core curriculum of the concentration. But of course, you could take any of those courses even if you wanted to be more of a generalist. But then to go beyond that, and I've already pretty much taken up all of the time you have in law school. But to go beyond that, we also have courses in business planning, securities litigation, corporate social responsibility, corporate governance, business and economic analysis, investment management, which is the law relating to investment companies like mutual funds and investment advisors, and really the list gets longer every year. So you could easily come to Villanova and do nothing but business law courses. We urge you to get a little bit of exposure to some other things, like you might want to know something about constitutional law, or maybe even contracts, but we've got a lot to offer in the area. So I think if you're interested in business law, it's a great place to land. So
yeah. So Professor Booth lists a laundry list of different business law and tax offerings that we have here at Villanova. For Zack and Brooke, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the classes that you're in right now that pertain to that, and maybe a favorite class that you've taken thus far in the concentration, if you want to start, Zack.
Sure. Well, right now I'm taking securities litigation and business planning. And I think Professor Booth touched on securities litigation a little bit, but, as one might imagine, that has a lot to do with, the various legal aspects of securities, whether it's, something like I'm doing right now is writing a paper on a couple laws from the 90s and how those are being implemented today when it comes to various securities lawsuits. And business planning is a little bit off in a different direction. We've been essentially having a couple of scenarios where we've been helping mock clients basically set up a corporation. So that's been a pretty interesting hands-on experience. But my favorite class, I'd say it's a tie between business organizations, which I had with Professor Lund last year, because, that was really cool learning about Delaware law and corporations and partnerships and corporate finance as well, because that was really, at least in some respects, I think it laid the groundwork for securities litigation that we're going through now. So those are my two favorite classes. And I guess it's not too surprising since I have my accounting background, anything that involves law and numbers is going to be something I enjoy.
Brooke?
Wow. Well, Zach mentioned a lot of classes, but I also have a background in accounting and finance. So I did find Fed tax or well, both tax classes interesting. But I like that it was different learning it from a law perspective than it was learning in a business school. Like you're not just sitting there crunching numbers, you're kind of reading cases and interpreting what the language and the code means and stuff like that. Other classes I've taken pertaining to business law, not necessarily in the concentration, but I really liked mergers and acquisitions, which just kind of was a general, well, actually, it was kind of specific, but a lot of different cases going through different litigation that arise in the context of mergers. And then I really like transactional writing with Professor Robinson. It just introduced like the concept of contract drafting, and you got to do mock negotiations in groups and by yourself. Some other classes, corporate finance as well. I also really liked corporate constitutional rights, which was a seminar. I really like constitutional law in general, but it was interesting to see how in the context of corporations, Constitution will treat the corporations like a person sometimes, but not in other amendments. So yeah, I don't know. I've taken a lot of different types of classes, but all of them were interesting in different ways, I guess.
Yeah, so outside of the classroom, one thing that sort of Villanova prides itself on is its experiential learning opportunities. So it's hands-on training with over 6 different clinics, in-house clinics here at Villanova, and over 270 externship opportunities that span outside of just the greater Philadelphia area. And I was wondering for Professor O'Hare, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about the clinic for law and entrepreneurship, as well as some of the externship placements that are related to sort of corporate and business law.
Right. So happy to. So most law schools have a variety of clinics. And we have, as Matt said, more than 6 or so clinics. But most of the clinics tend to focus on litigation. So they're all the same in that you're representing you as a law student under the supervision of an attorney or representing a real life client. But most clinics are litigation oriented. And so not all a lot of what corporate law is about is transactional work. And so more and more schools are trying to have clinics that focus on transactional lawyering, counseling, drafting, reviewing. And so we started a clinic called the Law Entrepreneurship Clinic several years ago, where students under the supervision of Professor Kamal Villa represent real life clients. And so these would be nonprofits and for-profit businesses, normally startups in the Philadelphia area. And our clinic's a little different because it focuses primarily on helping companies operate sustainably. And that's the focus of the clinic. So, but the work is the same. So the work would be things like helping your client decide what kind of organization how to be organized. We call this choice of entity. Should you be an LLC? Should you be a corporation? Should you be a public benefit corporation? Questions like that. And then once that is decided, the students would be drafting and filing the operating documents. They would be drafting and filing if nonprofit, certain tax status, reviewing leases, drafting contracts, negotiating. And so that's obviously very popular clinic because it's the clinic that's for people who are interested in practicing corporate law. If you're more interested in seeing what it's like to actually be working in a corporation, we have, as Matt said, a variety of externships. Villanova, unlike a lot of law schools, allow externships to be, but all schools have externships. Most law schools require the externships to be in a placement in a government agency or a judge or in a nonprofit. Villanova allows students to extern at for-profit enterprises. And so our students can work in law firms. They can work in the general counsel's office of major corporations. So, for example, students around at Villanova have externships at Comcast, Vanguard, Wawa, public companies like UGI Amerigas, hedge funds, private equity firms, Hamilton Lane. Brooke mentioned she worked for Bryn Mawr Trust Bank, which has been, I guess, recently merged. Now it's WSV. I forget, they changed the name. So in addition, students, I'm always overseeing students' externships at the SEC. The SEC has a Philadelphia office. The students work there. They help out with insider trading, often insider trading cases. We also send students, if you're interested in corporate law, to be working in judges' chambers in bankruptcy court. Wilmington has one of the most active and important bankruptcy practices in the country, along with the Southern District of New York. So students can work in bankruptcy chambers. And also we're sending students to extern and the Delaware Chancery Court, which is the most important business court in the world. So in addition to those kinds of experiential learning, we also have sent teams of students to participate in intra law school competitions where they negotiate, and there's a prize awarded. So lots of opportunities for students to get experiential learning at Villanova in the business area for sure.
Yeah, so the American Bar Association has a requirement that you do at least 6 credits of experiential learning, no matter the law school to which you attend. So most schools have, or I won't say most schools have clinics, externships, and also simulation classes. We primarily do the former two. So for Zach, are you done with your experiential learning credits? Are you still going? And if for the ones that you've completed, what have you done for externships?
Well, I'm still going actually, because I have done 2, but I'm doing a 3rd one next semester because, I really enjoyed that sort of learning environment. And Professor O'Hara mentioned one of the ones I had, which was with AGI. That one I wanted to take because it was really targeted. A large part of it was in contract law. And that's certainly what I'm interested in doing in the future with corporations. Mergers and acquisitions is a lot of contracts. So I really enjoyed that one. And then I also did a clerkship, just a regular federal clerkship with a judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I believe that was in the spring because, I figured if I'm going to be writing all these contracts, I need to get in a judge's head and learn how they think when it comes time to actually interpret those contracts. And then moving forward next semester, I'll have an internship in a local real estate company. Because even though I think corporate law is more for me, I did do a lot of accounting work in real estate. So I kind of want to get my feet wet on real estate law before, I definitively say I want to go into mergers and acquisitions for a corporation. But so I've enjoyed my experience with the externships.
Yeah, and Brooke, I think in the intro you mentioned one of the externships that you did, but if you wouldn't mind kind of going into some of the work that you've done in the externships that you pursued.
Sure. Yeah. As I said earlier, one of my externships was with Bryn Mawr Trust Company and with their general legal counsel. Basically, they are a bank, a financial institution, but I worked on a lot of different transactional writing assignments and some corporate governance issues, just with managing their different locations and drafting board resolutions, things like that. And then I was supposed to do an externship at Troutman Pepper during 2022, which they have a business law and entrepreneurship externship specific to Villanova, but that ended up being canceled because of COVID. However, I've heard great things about it. And then my other externship I did at a smaller firm in Media, Pennsylvania, where I did a variety of things. A lot of it was just general civil litigation, but I also had a large focus in bankruptcy and tax law. We represented a major creditor, so that was a really good experience, just almost from a smaller firm perspective. And I got a lot of hands-on work with drafting different documents in bankruptcy cases and everything like that. So both were really positive experiences. I would recommend. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, so Brooke and Zach mentioned some of the externships that they pursued. On top of those that they mentioned, we have externships also with the General Counsel for Wawa, with FINRA, with the SEC. Brooke mentioned that unfortunate one that got canceled with Troutman Pepper. We have one with GlaxoSmithKline, with Blank Rome, with the Consumer Bankruptcy Assistance Project, St. Gobain, and more. So there's a lot of opportunities within that space, and that's something that is quite unique to Villanova, since a lot of law schools out there typically will only allow their students to do externships with government agencies, public interest organizations, or with judges. And while we do certainly have externships with all of those 3 I mentioned, it's great to know that our students can also pursue externships with corporations in addition to law firms as well. So we kind of deep dived into the course opportunities. We deep dived into the externship opportunities and clinical opportunities. So next up is how students can get involved outside of those. And one of them are research related opportunities at Villanova. So for Booth and for O'Hare, would you mind sharing sort of some of the directed research that is supervised by faculty that students have been involved with, not just maybe with you two, but with other professors as well?
Well, yeah, I can. Let me take that for just a minute here. It really kind of depends on what people are working on. So, as I mentioned before, Professor Lund does a lot of empirical work in relating to executive compensation, which is, of course, a really very controversial area, because people are under the impression that CEOs get paid too much, and the question is, why is that, and why can't we do something about it, and what causes it, and what's the remedy? So especially those of us who do work that relates to sort of gathering numbers and trying to figure out what the real cause and effect of something is. Those are some really pretty significant opportunities because they tend to be labor intensive, and there's a lot of stuff that can be farmed out. I think some of us would like to farm out the thinking part, right? I mean, if we could find a student who would just go figure out what the answer is for us and let us write it, that would be great. But we have to come up with the project first. I had a couple of students a few years back who helped me out on a project relating to securities fraud class actions. And if I can just take like 30 seconds to get into some sort of substance, there are two ways that you can bring a securities. There are two ways that investors can get defrauded, right? Sometimes corporations will say something that's false that makes the company look like it's too good. And when the truth comes out, the price goes down and people lose money. On the other hand, there are a lot of important cases that work in exactly the opposite direction. That is, companies sometimes disseminate information that makes things sound really gloomy, and that we're going to hell in a handbasket, and the company's going to fail or something like that. And it turns out the company's on the verge of doing something really good, and so people sell their stock thinking that the news is all bad, and all of a sudden the price goes up, right? And so in that case, the people who want to sue are the people who sold. In the other case, the people who want to sue are the people who bought. Well, I wondered whether, how the numbers of those two cases compared. So I had, as it turned out, although with two women students in one of my seminars, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I had them go do some research, and they discovered that there are 50 cases of covering up bad news for every one case of covering up good news. Now, you would think that probably the cases ought to be split 50-50. So why is it that 50 times the number of cases of bad news cover-ups occur compared to good news cover-ups? Well, they did the research for me, and they were the ones that found that data, and I'll be forever grateful to them for doing it, because I think I put it in probably 6 articles in the meantime. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I like hiring students to do. But Professor O'Hare, you may have other sorts of things.
Well, sure. I mean, there's two types. I mean, there's actually 3 different ways students can, if you're interested in kind of doing some research and writing, more of an academic writing at Villanova. And one is, as Professor Booth mentioned, you can become an RA for a faculty member. You work over the summer, even work all year, helping a faculty member work on a law review article. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to do a directed research or take a seminar with a faculty member. So like, for example, Zack mentioned that he's in Professor Booth's securities litigation class right now. And so he's writing a paper and conducting research and writing he's doing the thinking, Rich. He's doing his own thinking, and, and so he's doing his own thinking. And so every student at Villanova is required to take a seminar, to do a research project, to do a writing project for graduation. So at Villanova, you could choose to do one really involving corporate law or not. It's up to you. In addition, or you can work, a faculty member could supervise you on a project. So for example, last year, a student wanted to do a writing project on insider trading engaged in by government officials. It's kind of, you might have been seeing some news articles about this more recently. It's something called the Stock Act, STOCK, STOP. I forget what the acronym is for, but it was really fun working with her on that. I mean, so she wrote a paper and I supervised it. And the great thing is that she submitted it and, won a prize at the ABA business writing section. It was a really terrific paper. The third way is to do writing or do research at Villanova is to join a journal and work on a journal and write an article that hopefully will get published as a student note or student comment. And so students can pick topics, if you're on a journal, pick whatever topic you want. So there's plenty of opportunities at Villanova if you're interested in doing research or on your own under the supervision of a faculty member, or working with a faculty member on a project, as Professor Booth mentioned.
So lots of opportunities to get involved. And then, yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing, and I know it wasn't something planned in advance, but I was wondering for Brooke and for Zack, outside of the research, the clinical opportunities, externship opportunities, and classes, how else are students involved? How else are you involved on campus? Any particular student groups or organizations or things that you partake in or have partaken over the past 2.5 going on 3 years at Villanova?
Sure. I think I forget who mentioned it, but Brooke and I are both on the law review. So, I think that takes up a lot of our time, not only doing the work for it, but, of course, there could be some nice social events. Like we had a softball game a couple of weeks ago that we all went to. So, there's certainly the enjoyable aspect to it as well. But I suppose the one other group, at least I'm involved in, is the Federalist Society, which is, pretty interesting for anyone who has an interest in constitutional law and, getting various perspectives on it. And, they always have food at their meetings, so I enjoy that. So, it's been a nice group to be a part of.
In addition to law review, like Zack said, I'm also in corporate law society and sports law society. I was an athlete in undergrad. I was on the swim team here, and I really like sports. I'm obsessed with the Eagles, and I go to like every Villanova basketball game. So if that counts as like an extracurricular, like going to basketball games and like getting student tickets from my brother in the undergrad, like I'm involved in that. But yeah, there's like many different societies you can join, and you don't have to be like active in it. Like sports law, I've never had a position or anything. I just go listen to the speakers sometimes. Whereas corporate law society, I was a 1 hour representative where you just kind of help get the word out about your events and different things like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can get involved, like outside the classroom.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. I know we have a number of different questions, so I want to get to some of them right now before we close out of here. We had a question from Ethan that was specific to maintaining FINRA licenses. So we asked, do we offer any opportunities to earn or maintain FINRA licenses as a law student? So I don't know if any of the professors can speak to that.
Not that I'm aware of. I know some students have gotten their license before law school and come to law school, but I don't think that our courses are geared towards licensure. I don't think that.
Right. No, not specifically, but I mean, there's certainly a lot of overlap there. I mean, if you can put yourself in pretty good stead for taking a class in securities regulation or several of the other courses. If you really know what's going on. So
you'll pass them, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's but we don't really do that. We don't offer that sort of course. I mean, we don't really offer a bar review course either, though. But it doesn't mean we don't teach you a lot of what you need to know.
Right.
And actually, this brings up a great point, because I know you are allowed to audit classes outside of the law school. And Zack, haven't you done that during your time here thus far?
I have. I actually just finished last week. I took a I took a class in the Graduate School of Tax, which was, I think it was just called Survey of Tax. It really gave you a broad overview of individual income taxes, corporate taxes, partnership tax, international tax, pretty much every field there is. It gave me a brief overview, and, it's definitely a great experience. And, next semester I'm aiming to take one as well, because, it's such a, good learning experience that, I'll look at the course catalog, but I'm looking to continue that.
Wonderful. And we had another question kind of that was geared towards the students themselves, asking, why did you ever want to go to law school? What was your impetus behind going to law school? Brooke, if you want to start that out, especially as someone who kind of went to VSB or Villanova School of Business and then came right to Villanova.
Yeah, so I've always had an interest in the law. Like I've been watching Law and Order since I was maybe 10 years old. But aside from that, I came to college not really knowing what I wanted to do. I went into the business school. Like I liked finance and accounting, but like I did an internship at Morgan Stanley one summer. I didn't think it was totally for me. So junior year, beginning of senior year, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I took this one class in mergers and acquisitions and corporate restructuring. And it was like the first time I kind of got a legal perspective on how these matters work and everything. And that's kind of what made me want to go to law school and pursue a more corporate law, business law career. So I applied kind of late, but got in and it worked out. So, yeah.
And then Zach, as someone who already had a bunch of letters after his name from CPA to MBA, had a great career. What was that decision like to decide to reinvest in your education and go 3 years of law school, probably making decent money, maybe not Davis Polk money, but decent money. So what made you decide that law school was going to be the next step in your career?
Well, I think one of the more significant reasons is that as much as I enjoyed working in accounting, one of the things I wasn't too crazy about with that field is that you're really focusing on transactions that have already happened. Essentially, you're going through, things that other people have already done. And I was of the mindset of, I'd like to be the person, doing that work, being at the forefront. My older sister was in transactional law at the time, and I knew the sort of work she was working on. It was a mix of, what's the word I'm looking for? Capital markets work, and mergers and acquisitions and everything in between. Because that work sounded pretty interesting to me, and, she was leading from the front and the accountants were the ones cleaning up, her mess. I said, sounds like law is a pretty good deal for me. So that was one of the big sellers on getting me to make the switch from being in accounting, where I was, taking care of transactions that someone else already worked on, to moving into law, where, ideally I'll be at the front working on the transaction.
Thank you. And we had a question that maybe O'Hare, you might have some insight to, and I've answered this question before, so I have some little research onto it, but they're wondering how the dual degree, particularly the JD MBA, impacts employment opportunities within the business law sphere, if you happen to know offhand.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I used to be the director of the JD MBA program on the law school side, and that was probably more than 5 years ago. But I did it for a period of time, and it's funny. Like 10 years ago, employers were a little suspicious almost of students who are getting the JD MBA. I think that's fair to say. At least some law firms, because they were like, "Well, why do you need 2 degrees?" And they were almost concerned that students weren't really interested in being lawyers. They were interested in going, maybe they'd work for a couple of years and decide to abandon the law and go over to the business side. And I always thought that was such like a strange approach, or a strange belief, because the JD MBA, I mean, having a business background is so helpful for students to understand the language, to understand the deals, to be able to talk to your clients. I mean, to understand their business. It's a very positive thing. Is it necessary to be a terrific corporate lawyer to have an MBA? Of course not. I don't have an MBA. I mean, like lots of people don't have MBAs. I was a good lawyer. You don't need to have that degree, but it's certainly a plus. And nowadays, employers are seeing it that way, especially employers who do important, sophisticated corporate work. They see the JD and the MBA, pairing as really a positive thing. Once again, you don't need it. So if you're out there thinking, oh gosh, you absolutely do not need both degrees. But to the extent that you want to, it's definitely a positive, and it helps differentiate you from other people in the market. So I would say it's for sure a positive.
Just to build off of what Professor O'Hare said, there are some firms that actually do offer bonuses for people who join the firm who have those joint JD MBA degrees. So, if that helps sweeten the deal for anyone out there, that is something to keep in mind, depending on what firm you might end up at.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that for our class of 2023, so our second year law students right now, 2 of them were very interested in the JD MBA program, and they asked me this question about where do students go off to afterwards. So I reached out to the director of the JD MBA program, Professor Lund, and asked him if he can provide me with a list so I can stalk them all on LinkedIn and figure out where everyone ended up. Mm-hmm. So out of the 22 individuals that had did it over the past 3 years, when I looked into this in the summer of 2020, all of them were either at a Big 4 accounting firm, a major law firm. So I compiled the list, I sent it to them. So you have a corporate litigation associate at Young Conaway, you have an associate at Kirkland Ellis in New York City, you have people who did enterprise risk management at Bryn Mawr Trust, corporate associates at Blank Rome, people who went to sports agencies at Global Sports Advocates in Portland, Maine, as a tax consultant at Deloitte in San Francisco, labor and employment associates, M&A associates over at Morgan Lewis, litigation associates at Nelson Mullins in Boston, to policy advisors for congressional campaigns in San Diego, to Cooley in DC, tax consultants over in McLean, Virginia, and the list goes on and on and on. So fortunately, when I did this, every single person that did the JD MBA program ended up in a great career. But the disclaimer is that prior results do not guarantee future ones. So just know it still takes a lot of work and effort. And, the success is not just due to the program itself, but due to the students who pursued it. We have another question about students who pursue the business law concentration. Do they remain in Philadelphia post-graduation, or are they ending up in other major legal markets? O'Hare, do you have any idea?
I would say that it's a mixed bag. I mean, just like you can see today with Brooke and Zack. I mean, Zack's going to New York and Brooke is staying in Philadelphia. Philadelphia legal market, students come to Villanova and they may even have intentions to go back to, practice in New York, but people like Philly. It's a great place to live. So a lot of students do tend to stay in Philly, but we tend to, so I would say probably maybe half stay in Philly, some go to, maybe 25% to New York, and then maybe 25% to Wilmington. I mean, we send a lot of students because Delaware is such an important corporate jurisdiction. We tend to, Villanova generally, but also concentration specifically, students do tend to go to Wilmington. I haven't done the numbers, but I would probably do. That's about right, Rich. Wouldn't you say 50% Philadelphia, maybe 50% elsewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think we've got a couple. I just looked at this recently. I think we've got a couple of people in Boston too.
Yeah, DC, Boston.
It's. I don't know if for the population of students applying to law school, Wilmington is a particular draw. It's really where very interesting work goes on there's nothing else like it in the world, really. Maybe but it's a lot of the people who work in Wilmington live in Philly. So and they like doing the commute the other way. So there's a lot more fun to be had in Philly. So you can live in Philly and work in Wilmington and just take the train back and forth. It's only
and making New York salaries.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think that's about right. I think that 50% and probably stay in Philly. But I think that it's really the students who would want to go elsewhere, like Zack wanted to go to New York. That was one of his priorities. He on his own and with help, the position. So it's certainly easier for all of our students to get jobs in the Philly and Wilmington area just because, we're here, but more and more of our students are going to New York. New York firms are recognizing that our students are really strong and they need, they're breaking out of their kind of New York City shell and T14 shell, and we're sending more and more of our students to New York. If that's kind of what the question is, like, where else can you go? You can go anywhere with a Villanova degree, but I think it's fair to say that most of our students like it in Philadelphia and kind of decide to stick around.
Yeah, and that kind of falls true. Like, even when you look at the bar passage for July,
Right.
only about half of our students took
That's
the
right, to
Pennsylvania bar.
Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, had a bar pass rate of 92.5%, so not too shabby. It was about we were only second to Penn, which is less than a point above, but we were about 8 points above the next law school in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and a good portion of our students end up going to New York. I know just a year ago we had 100% bar pass rate in the state of New York, which is fantastic. So we more and more ends up being a draw, and that kind of falls suit when you look at our class profile. So the majority of our students don't come from Pennsylvania. A good portion come from New Jersey, from New York, about 17% from the South, which is always great and odd at the same time in terms of why they're leaving the nice warm weather. But you can get your degree at Villanova, will open up opportunities wherever you want to work. You can take the bar in any jurisdiction that you want. You're not limited to just PA or the Northeast. So the earlier you know where you want to go, the easier time will be, because your career advisor and the career center can certainly help you kind of tailor opportunities and open up opportunities for you in the region where you may want to practice. Outside of that, there's a lot more questions about the JD MBA program. Zach, maybe, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, would getting the MBA before the JD still open up those bonus opportunities that you were mentioning?
That's a good question. Really depends on the firm, because some of them might be strict and say that, they want you to have the joint degree. Others I might imagine are a little bit more flexible, but honestly, I didn't even know that firms were giving out bonuses until recently. So I'd have to do a bit of research to get an answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know either. In terms of how many students pursue the JD MBA program, I mean, in each class, I would say roughly anywhere from usually it's like 5 to 10 each and every year. And based upon the list of schools that I did in 2020, there was 22 or 24 names out of 3 years of research that I did there. So that was equivalent of about 7 to 8 students in each class. So that's typically the average. Again, one of the biggest benefits is not just saving a year of cost of living, because you can complete it in 3 years, but it saves you roughly $11,000 off of the cost of the MBA because of the way in which credits are double counted. And then there's a $2,000 subsidy you get in the second and third year here at Villanova. So it can chop off about $15K from the price of your MBA JD tuition, which is kind of nice. In terms of, we had a question about, can students sit in on classes virtually? As of right now, we don't offer that. That's not something we offer to prospective students. I mean, you're always welcome to reach out to professors if you'd like to see if they offer it, but the majority of our classes are in person. I think there's only about 2 or 3 classes that are being offered virtually right now, with Intro to Fed Tax with Book being one of them, I believe, right? So it's not even an option for most of our students, which is fortunate, because the in-person instruction, as Brooke attested to before, is really important sometimes for just paying attention and, keeping track of all the work that you're doing. Outside of that, that is kind of all the questions that we've had thus far. If you have more, feel free to type it in. But for O'Hare, for Booth, for Zach and Brooke, is there anything that you would like prospective students to know that are applying to, thinking about Villanova? Any soft pitch you want to make for the law school, especially when it comes to the business law opportunities that exist here?
I'll just mention that, at least for myself, when I was reaching out to firms in New York, the alumni network here in Villanova at large, but, especially the law school as well, is really terrific. And pretty much everyone I reach out to at those firms who are working there, who are Villanova alumni, more than happy to have a call with me, 20 or 30 minutes, give me an overview of the firm, some advice for the interview process. And actually, at Davis Polk, that was one of the firms that, one of the employees there was a Villanova alumni and was willing to talk to me. And, he really helped me. I'll be honest, he really told me the entire interview process. So, that was a bit of a big help when it came to getting the job there. So, that's my pitch is, when it comes to finding opportunities, the alumni here are, really good and really dedicated to, helping the current students.
I would definitely agree with Zach on the alumni network point. I mean, I don't think I've ever had an interview anywhere where at least one of the people didn't go to Villanova or know someone who did or have some kind of connection. And I mean, I worked in Delaware over the summer. I'm working in Philly this summer, but even at the Delaware firm I worked at, I must have had at least 10 people come to my office, ranging from like 60-year-old partners to people who just graduated a few years ago, saying like, oh, when I was at Villanova, like, did you have this person? Did you have this class? And like a lot of it's the same, some of it's different, but like there's always a connection. And this being my 6th year at Villanova, I can say it's a really great place to be just in general. Like the community on campus, everybody's very friendly, very nice. And it's something like very unique that I didn't find at other universities. And having 2 brothers in the undergrad, I'm sure they would say the same thing. So not just the law school in general, but like outside the law school to have friends and have a social life and get involved in other kinds of sports or activities. I just think it's a really well-rounded place to be.
Mhm.
Do I have more Brunos applying to law school soon?
What?
Are your brothers younger than you? And are they going to be oh, all right. So
one's a freshman, one's a senior, and I think they both don't have any interest in
okay. just making sure. O'Hara Booth.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our brand, you see is where law meets business, and sometimes the brand is just the brand. It's just something people say, but hopefully with this webinar, you see that there's actually so much substance going on with the business law. I mean, we have a real business law curriculum here, program here that, you can take it all the way by having a joint degree or go with the concentration, or it can just be that you're interested in going to a school that offers you opportunities, to be able to work and extern in places and hop on the train that stops at Villanova and go into Philly, or take a car and go down to Wilmington. I mean, the idea that, 3 of our students next semester are going to be externing at the Delaware Chancery Court. I mean, these are opportunities that you can't get everywhere. And also we haven't had Professor Booth did a great job talking about the courses that we have here. And he mentioned that we have a large number of full-time faculty that the school has invested in hiring. It's not all schools do that, maybe 1 or 2 people, and that's it. But in addition, we have some great adjuncts that teach some courses. And so, we mentioned that Professor Booth mentioned we have an investment management course that's taught by the General Counsel of Vanguard. I mean, like this is like, or like the mergers and acquisitions course that was mentioned, that Brooke mentioned. I mean, that's taught by a partner in Wilmington who's actually litigating these things. And so there's a nice balance of, you get practical knowledge and you have people who are doing it and opportunities to really explore that I don't think you can get many other places. I mean, maybe NYU, I don't match I say that, but you're not going to get it anywhere else really. And certainly not in Philadelphia. I can say that for sure.
I'd say I'd like to add one thing, and that is that the class is not big. I mean,
right.
We shoot for around, something between 175, 185. Sometimes we overshoot, as Matt well knows, but you just never know whether it's hard to keep up with how much people want to come here, and it's hard to judge that from one year to the next. But it's a very homey place, and it's and the food's good. Well, we have a great dining room. So you just come here and stay all day, right? You never want to go home. We don't have any housing, but they're great places to live around. So, no, I mean it's one of the things that's really, really appealing about Villanova is that everybody likes being around because they like the people they're around. And that's all there is to it, And
I will just echo that as a New York City native, that was not something I was ever accustomed to. when I interviewed here, some random student asked me how I was doing, and just I didn't know him, he didn't know me. Yeah, he knew I didn't go here. This was back in 2015, and I remember thinking in my head, I don't have any money. Like, what do you want from me? And for me, just feeling like so welcomed into a community and feeling so supported, and seeing how great the students were made me really want to make sure that that kind of community and culture was preserved. So that's why we started our interview program 4 years ago. It's really to make sure that there's so many smart people out there. There's many talented folks who I have no doubt, can do well in the classroom, go on to graduate and be a great attorney, but it has to be about something more. And in addition to being smart and talented, I want to make sure that our students have great character, that are going to be good role models for others in the future, so that you're good ambassadors of Villanova, and that you actively raise a reputation that are going to encourage more people to want to come to Villanova in the future, but also provide pathways and pipelines for our current students to end up in greater positions in the future. So for us, it's not just saying it's a great community and saying we're supportive and saying it's homey, but it's something that we are actively doing through our interview program and looking for something a little bit different in our candidates, which is why the culture in the community is the way it is. I want to make sure that Brooke, that Zach, and our other students are proud of the next group of students that we bring in, because I'm going to hear from them if they're not. So it's something that we're building here that's wonderful, and we hope that for those on the call tonight, that you are seriously considering Villanova. If you do have more questions, just feel free to reach out to our office. We're always happy to answer questions, connect you with students and professors, so you don't just have to listen to me all the time. But I want to thank all the students, Brooke, Zach, Professor Booth and O'Hare, for taking the time this evening to talk with everyone. Thank you to all who joined the call tonight. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Best of luck to those who are going through the admissions process right now. For those who are going and have already submitted applications, know that the first wave of decisions goes out in the first week of December. So soon, you'll get some responses back. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your weeks. Best of luck with your cycles. Have a wonderful night. And thank you all again, and take care.